welcome all of our listeners to our first episode of Teacher Chat for the year. I am Todd Walker, your co-host, flying solo this afternoon, but Todd will be back. But we have a wonderful topic and some wonderful guests here this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the third teacher, suspense. We'll talk about what that is throughout the episode. Our guests today include Alex Trevino, and I'll let them share a little bit about themselves. He is Director of Capital Improvements. Dr. Chris Brady, who is the principal of a wonderful school that you will learn more about throughout the day, and Nicoline Quatman, who is a teacher at that school, and they will share about some of the wonderful transformations that have been going on there. So I want to sort of first give you all an opportunity to share a little bit about your history with the district for our listeners. I think each of you are new to Teacher Chat. Teacher Chat is an opportunity. We really want to center teacher voice. It's not that Alex and Chris are not important, but Nicole, you are the superstar of the show today. But certainly there's a lot that goes into supporting the work of teachers, right? And so our work in our conversation today is going to be around the physical transformations that support the work of instruction, teaching, and learning. So in that vein, I want to just sort of go around. Alex, you can start, and then we'll go to Nicole, Dr. Brady. Share a little bit about who you are, what your role is in the district as it relates to facilities and structures and renovations, all the things. And then, a little bit about how long you've been in your role, and then we'll get right into it. Alex.
Great. So again, Alex Trevino. I serve as the district's Director of Capital Improvements. I'm just about to clip year 20 here with the district. Prior to coming here, I worked about 7 years in private sector, almost always doing institutional work with heavy focus on education, K-12 work, which is kind of what landed me here at the district. So architect by training. And you very much, so you get the fundamentals of design in school. You don't necessarily get the specifics about any particular focus. And so have really spent the past 20 years here at the district learning about K-12 and figuring out how we continually adapt and evolve our practice to support academics. And it's been a really cool evolution to see it in my time here at the district.
And so before we go to Nicole, I don't know if you remember this, Alex, but I guess now about 20 years ago, right? Something around that number. It was probably around then. It was the first time I met you. You look exactly like you look now. So whatever you're doing, right, keep it up, right? I had hair at the time and less gray, but and it was at South High School, and we were getting ready to do that renovation there. We were going over to the swing space at Barrett Middle School. And you have been a focused individual, even as a young man that was coming into the role at that time, and have continued to carry yourself with the utmost character and focus on the work. So thank you for that.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nikki Quatman. I've been at Hamilton for 13 years. I've been an instructional coach and a teacher the 13 years I've been there.
Love it.
Been in the district for 23, and I love being at Hamilton. I work for Dr. Brady the entire time.
What grades do you teach?
I started out as a 5th grade teacher there. I spent several years teaching 3rd grade. I spent part of one of my years teaching 6th grade. And I think that's about it while I've been there. I've been a little bit of everything.
That's awesome.
So
Well,
I go where I'm needed.
Well, thank you for being here. Looking forward to hearing more from you. And the man, the myth, the legend. We were talking about Tom Cruise to my left over here earlier today. He has a wonderful picture on his ID badge that likens him to that great actor.
That's right.
And still has the swag, okay? So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Chris Brady, this is my 30th year in CCS. Love being here. 16th year at Hamilton, and each year gets better. We love what we're doing. Got great teachers, great staff, lovely, awesome students, and we have lots of support. Alex has been integral in getting our building up and going in the right direction. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But
yeah,
just glad to be here, and I appreciate the. I have to go watch a Tom Cruise movie tonight.
That's right. There you go. And you said year 16.
16 in Hamilton, yes.
Yeah, to 16 years in one building is a phenomenal accomplishment. You got to have one of the most senior principals in terms of tenure in a building.
Yes,
Do you know if anybody else has been in the building longer?
I believe there might be one.
Okay.
I believe it's Deborah Archie Wilkerson at
Okay.
Seaburg, possibly. I think
Got
she's
it.
got maybe 18.
18.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So, want to sort of level set around this idea of the third teacher. And I ran into this book, I would say now about 9 or 10 years ago. I was transitioning into a role as director of Afrocentric. When I took that role, the building was now no longer exists. It was the old Mohawk. And so down on Livingston, but near downtown. It's now a surface lot for Nationwide Children's Hospital. But we went into that facility, and there was already planning in the works for this new facility that was being built out by the airport, 55 acres, $47 million, something. It's pretty
remarkable
close.
memory there.
Pretty close, all right, in terms of what it cost. And it began working regularly with Alex and a team of folks. Annette Marood was part of that group. Maurice Oldham was part of that group, and others that were part of that operations side, thinking about what the new space would be. They were putting the final touches on it really when I came into the process. But the building was a blank canvas in a lot of ways in terms of wall space, right? And intentionally, there were showcases with opportunities to put things in, right? We hadn't decided yet exactly what would go in them. And so, I decided I needed to have some help. And sort of my initial thought was, I think we all pretty much know, just experientially, that students, really all people, right, we learn from each other, but students also, they learn from the adults in their spaces, their teachers primarily, but also principals, support staff, custodians, cafeteria managers, everyone who's in the space. But they also learn from the environment, right? And so space matters, the environment matters, the way where students dwell and spend time, what they look at in that space is meaningful. And so this idea of looking at the third teacher, I think, was newer for me. I know that before we came on, we were in the blue room, which is not a room; it's just right over there to the side. But the green room, right, is what they call it. But we were talking about this book, and Alex said, "Yeah," he said, "that's how we frame our work. That's how we think about our work." And so certainly there's been a lot of conversation by Dr. Chapman, our superintendent, by our board members, by our community around facilities, and around the need to sort of transition our facilities into the 21st century for a 21st century learning environment. So I wonder, Alice, if we just sort of start with you, if you can give us sort of a bird's eye view, 30,000-foot view on how, in your shop, you think about this work of facilities. I know we're going to talk specifically about Hamilton, which is the building that Dr. Brady leads and Nicole is a teacher at. But writ large, the district, you've been working in a lot of different spaces. So talk to me about sort of how you and others have been thinking about this work as it relates to creating that environment that helps to facilitate learning for our students.
Yeah, Dr. Walker, I think a couple words kind of come to mind when I think about the role of design and then construction ultimately and how we support academic programs and education. So probably the first one would be intentionality. So there are very few things that are going to happen in any building, and we can use Hamilton STEM as the example, that happen by accident. And if they happen by accident, everybody's probably well aware of them too. So in our world, everything is very prescribed, it's very designed. Sometimes it's very rigid in terms of it's driven by standard, and sometimes it's quite free-flowing. It just kind of depends on the issue. And then the other, words that come to mind for me are static and dynamic. So facilities are inherently pretty static. They don't change on their own. Maybe we can move the furniture, maybe somebody will take upon themselves to paint a wall, but just the nature of facilities they're relatively static, and yet the programs we're offering are oftentimes very dynamic. And so, to your comments about a brand new, blank slate of Afrocentric and how to kind of start working on tailoring it, Like I think like there's an inherent tension we're always looking at between facilities and people. The buildings aren't going to change unless we intentionally plan changes to those buildings. And thankfully, we're in a position financially now where the district can do those on an ongoing basis. And yet we expect our people to be very dynamic. We expect our students, we know they're going to be dynamic. And so always thinking about how we kind of marry those two things together as best we can. And it's a constant evolution. Like we probably all make mistakes every day, but we certainly make them in facilities too. And you have to learn from those things and just continue to evolve.
You know, I was reflecting on my way over here, getting ready for the session, about a visit I had to Mifflin High School earlier this year. And, you know, I was a high school principal for 10 years. And so I had been in that, not at Mifflin, but, you know, you with athletics, you're in high schools a lot, right? And so, you know, when they said, yes, we're doing renovations at Mifflin, I'm thinking like, okay, this would be nice. You know, they're going to spruce it up, you know. And I didn't really have an idea of the magnitude of what was going on. I mean, when I went into that building, I was floored. The lighting, I mean, the total feel of the building was different. And so, you know, Nicole, I'm interested from your perspective, right? You're a teacher. You've been in that space for a while, so you've seen sort of the before and the after, right? You know, Hamilton is one of the spaces that we've been intentional, right, about, and there are others, and there's a plan for this, right, that Alex, I'm sure, will give you an opportunity to talk about that later. But you've seen this firsthand. So give me a sense of, like, what your, you know, just sort of what your feelings, what your emotions, even your intellect has, you know, your thinking has been about this transformation, what it has meant to you, perhaps other teachers, what you've seen in terms of what it's meant for students, your principal. You know, I just curious your perspective.
Prior to Alex even coming to see us about this redesign in Hamilton, we had started doing itty-bitty things. Like, we had been to Afrocentric, and we had fallen in love with some of the design features we had seen at Afrocentric. The classroom and the third teacher in the building. And, you know, all of that comes with a price tag. And so we were all of a sudden starting to put little stamps on our building with whatever we could. And then Alex came to us, and we were ecstatic. And when we presented it to the teachers became ecstatic about it. Our kids deserve a new building. Or not a new building, but our kids deserve a fun place to live or learn, a bright place to learn.
Yes.
And one of our teachers mentioned to me, it was very institutionalized. Our building was built in the 60s. The floors were just bland. Everything was the same.
Disgusting, but
Yeah, I was trying to be very correct. They were gross. They had layers and layers of wax on them. I mean, every summer they try and scrape them up. They were gross. The dirt was still there. The bookcases were falling apart. Like, even when you'd go in at the beginning of the school year, like the casings on top of the bookshelves were falling in. I mean, and when you have kids come in every year, they didn't respect it, because the reality is, what was there to respect? And as teachers, we did everything we could.
Yeah.
And to make them want to respect it, but the reality is, it's kind of hard. So Alex brought us a bright light, kind of, and we had already started some things with color schemes and things like that, and he took some of the little things that we'd already started with, and he gave the teachers buy-in. And he brought us ideas, and they built off something that we had already started. So the teachers actually had some input.
Yeah.
And everything that the little things we had already started as a building started to grow, and it turned into something amazing. And we have new life in our building. There's staff morale is high. Just a cleaner building. The kids believe in the building. Like, the kids want to clean up at the end of the day because the building's clean. They want to keep it neat. They talk about the gymnasium floor. Like, the gymnasium floor was gross, disgusting, dirty. Like, but they refinished the gymnasium floor. It's a lighter wood color. It's not a different floor. It just got refinished. The tiles, they put something down. It's not a new floor, but they laid something down and it's beautiful. But the kids have a new sense of feeling in the building, and the teachers have a new sense of feeling in the building.
You know, Dr. Brady, I want to give you a chance to jump in, but you, Nicole, when you were sharing, you made me think about something that was a sort of just a visceral reaction that the students at Afrocentric had. We were, it was a mid-year move, right? So that was a whole nother thing for us when we moved into that space. We were in the old Mohawk building for the first, and so, there was sort of this process of packing up and getting ready to think about the kids were going to come in January, but there was an opportunity that we had to bring some groups of kids, mainly student leaders, right, to the space. And they were just in Florida. Like, some were like, no kidding, like in tears, right? And the comment was, I just can't believe that this space is for us, And it struck me. I mean, it stays with me even to this day, right? And so, thank you for sharing, right, in just a real authentic way about your experience. I mean, it took me back to that space and how important, that was. And it's more about what it says to kids, right, about the spaces that we create for them, and to our staff, right, to our teachers. I think that matters.
Well, and when I talked to some of our students, it was interesting to me some of the things they remembered. Like, one of my students said, well, I remember the old TVs we had on the walls. They're like, those old TVs were glitchy. Like, whenever we went through a lesson, the TV shut down. The teachers had to restart the computers. Then we had to wait for the computer to restart. And we only got halfway through the lesson because we had to wait for the computers to reboot. She's like, the new computers, the new TVs, we don't have to wait for anything, they go. So things like that while we're looking at all the bright colors and the great lights and things like that, as a teacher, I actually had to sit back and think, oh yeah, that's right. We did have to shut down the computers. We did have to wait for everything to reboot and restart. And that's not something that happens as often, if ever.
Yeah.
So,
Dr. Brady, you've been there for 16 years, right? So it's similar to Nicole, you've had a chance to see the before and the after. So to give me the leadership lens on this process, the transformation from your vantage point.
Well, the word intentional keeps coming up, and to Ms. Quatman and Alex's point, the teachers got the buy-in. Well, obviously they were given this great gift, but they were able to sit down and pick out all the items they wanted, and that's like, wow. So it really shows respect and it shows value, and that's the same thing the kids felt too. That, hey, we value you. You mean something to us. We've improved everything from floor to ceiling to wall. Everything has been recrafted and brand new, right down to the tiniest detail. So kudos to our team and our district for making this happen for our kids and our staff. It's incredible. I've been guilty of this, and I think Alex has been on one of these tours. When I show some people around, we get to maybe the second or third hallway, and I will say something. I'll stop. Wait, you got to see this. You got to see this. This is my favorite. Someone invariably during the tour will say, you've said this is your favorite thing about 5 times now. And I'm like, I know. I really do know what that word means. But this really is special. I mean, the attention to detail. Alex made sure this happened. We have water fountains inside the classrooms now. Mm-hmm. Kids are not wasting time going in the hallways, going, can I go get a drink? There's a water fountain in the classroom. Something that was, Alex and I talked about this probably 15, 16 years ago. We had wires dangling in the hallways. we had talked about many ideas through the years and one year he came to me, I saw a school, they had this special encasing, they put it up in, I think, wood frame around it, and so he was excited about the idea. So then working into the budget, and when they did the redesign, I peaked about every week over the summer. I was there checking and getting all excited.
Mm-hmm.
The design team and the workers and our Scott was our lead. What was Scott's title? Project manager?
Like the superintendent.
Superintendent. They tried several ways to encase these wires, and the one they came up with was really very cost-effective and really quite simple. It was gutters, gutters you would use on your house, and they just drilled some holes, and it was like the second or third try they did, and it worked beautifully. So again, that was one of my favorites because seeing that in the hallways all the time, like, oh my gosh, this is not what we should have our kids seeing. So the intentionality was just incredible, and the how it's lifted up the staff and the students. They, like I said, they get so excited. It's nice to be able to go and have dedicated rooms for meetings where the furniture is designed for adults, and the same thing with the classrooms. Kids have been excited that, wow, there's different chairs I can sit in now if I need to reset or go somewhere to calm down. Different size chairs. I mean, I read the sample of the book. I do know it talks about how most schools have been designed for kids the size in the 1950s, and I think most are aware of this. Kids are a little bigger now than they were in the 50s. So having that furniture that's caught up to our kids and our staff has just been incredible.
So, we're going to stay with I words, right? So we've been talking about
Yes.
intentionality, right? And so then you brought up innovation, right? Which is, taking this, something that is typically used for the outside of a house, but
Yes.
you're figuring out how to put it on the inside
Yeah.
of the building in a unique way that solves an issue.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in hearing you talk a little bit about, and also you, Nikki, instructional impact. I've looked at your scores, right? I looked at them from so kudos on your progress
Thank you.
for this year.
Yes, it's all these guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be commended.
Yes.
And so and I want to make sure I get it right. I printed it off. 3 stars in progress, which 2.5 stars for the overall rating for the school.
Yeah.
And so, I want to hear about, we know that there are a lot of things. I mean, most of our listeners are teachers. There's other folks as well. So there's a lot of things that go into teaching and learning. But certainly space matters. One of the things that I found most interesting in this book, The Third Teacher, was talking about how attendance improved because of lighting and when renovations were done and new spaces were creating kids. And we know that one of the biggest indicators of academic achievement is attendance, right? If the kids aren't there, they can't learn.
Kids in seats.
So just curious about your thoughts on, number one, just to celebrate, kudos to both of you and to all of your staff who I'm sure will be listening to this.
It'll be played during staff. I mean, they're going to have to.
So, how do you, just tell us your story a little bit about the improvement journey, but how do you feel like the infrastructure, right, the changes in the school have contributed?
Well, we've always really harped on progress. We know that our achievement scores, they're low overall. So we really focus on progress and making improvements every year. And we have been making progress.
So tell us, like, for our listeners who may not be, educators, like, what's the difference between achievement and progress?
Achievement really is hitting the mark. So if it's almost like a pass-fail. And progress is moving towards that achievement goal.
How much the student grows in a particular
growth over a time period. So we've always focused on growth and progress, and we keep making incremental gains over the years. And I tell you what, last year was our first year in the new building, the redesign. And before the school year started, I was warned that the progress that we keep making, it's going to be hard to sustain. That we're going to plateau, and some people in the district expected us to plateau last year, And as you could see, we didn't plateau last year. Not saying it's not going to happen, but we increased across the board in math, and actually across the board in reading too, I believe. So we made substantial gains. Can keep moving forward, and I'd be hard pressed to believe that the impact that almost maybe a lightning in a bottle kind of feeling of walking into this new building didn't invigorate everybody. And to your point about attendance, having a new building, you got rid of a lot of old stuff that causes sickness and illness. We lost a lot of old furniture. I mean, the building was, all the walls were done, everything's done. So we have a building from 1960 now to 2023. So it's like, it's a lot of cleaning, a lot of stuff that was exited. So our attendance, got more kids there, and kids and staff were both in a happier place. When you're happier, you tend to do better.
So, Nikki, what about from a teaching perspective? You've been in the space doing the work day to day. What do you see? I mean, first of all, kudos again to you. It's shared leadership. Success in a school is always shared. So. And
like I said, I share a lot with them.
Oh yeah.
I give them.
And Dr. Brady, humble guy, but he's a phenomenal leader. Again, I was in the region working with you. Had a chance to rub up against him for a number of years, and he walks softly and carries a big stick, right? But he's not afraid to empower others. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
He's an amazing man. It is definitely a group effort. We never leave a meeting without 1, 2, 3 together. We all know we work as a team. In terms of attendance, it goes back to the cleanliness thing. I mean, the building's clean. There's not dust. We have less friends.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yes. Yes.
Less,
You got
less class pets, which is, you have that. That just happens. But, there's a lot more cabinetry and spaces where people can keep their things organized. Teachers talk about they can keep their materials organized, put away safely. Things are easier to clean up. And that just helps staff morale. And again, like I mentioned before, when kids see a clean space, the kids want to clean the space. So there's a lot more help throughout the building in maintaining there's a whole new sense of pride in that building and the spaces that they're in. So when you're maintaining that, it's a lot easier to maintain than previous years. So people's spirits are up, the cleanliness is up.
This did not make my top 5 favorites, but it was something I loved, and I know the kids loved. We used to have coat rooms, really just dividers. And they took up space, and they were just quite a pain. Kids would call them up, go put your hang of stuff in the coat room, you put it on a hook. Now they have their own individual cabinet. Mm-hmm. Something of their own, which I know you alluded to this earlier about when they came into your building, that, this is for us. Same thing here. This is for us. I have a place that I can put my belongings, that I can call, home.
Yeah, my own cubby.
My own cubby, yep. Yeah, absolutely. The cubby's important.
Yeah.
Something that opens and shuts, too.
Yes.
You're not just hanging your coat and your backpack on hook.
Oh, okay.
It's not out there for the whole
something
world.
that
Y'all got the 2.0.
Yes.
Okay, we didn't have those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about fill out a complaint form.
Like it's their own individual locker.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I see how it is.
Yeah.
So
That
Alex,
evolution, right?
so you've seen these transformations throughout the district, right? Not only in new construction, but now, I'd like you to share a little bit about the journey that we're on as a system now to look at some of our spaces. We want to be certainly responsible with the resources that we've been given. thank you to all of our listeners who are Columbus residents who voted for the passage of the levy that has allowed us to continue to do some of these innovative things for students. But Alex, I'd like you to share a little bit about that work, right, in spaces, and also, lean in, if there are particular things that Dr. Brady shared, that Ms. Quatman shared, that you think, are, relevant to sort of your thinking as you're doing this renovation work.
Yeah, so, so I came to the district under our new construction program. So, I mean, that is what I'm most familiar with. And I'll tell people frequently at this point, new construction is easy. It's also a ton of fun. It's maybe where we get to stretch our imagination the most and really kind of tailor build these buildings for programs. But I honestly think the much more meaningful work is what we just did at Hamilton STEM and then this past summer at Mifflin High School in Scottwood.
Mm-hmm.
It's honestly far more difficult. We have to pack almost the same amount of impact for us in about 2.5 months of summer work. So it's an incredibly compressed schedule. We also have to live within the confines of those existing buildings. But I'll also tell you, I think it's some of the most rewarding work we do too, because to be able to work with the staff during a preceding year, get the work done over a summer break, and then to see everybody come back in, like the people literally get to see their thoughts transformed into actions and then put it into their own practice. So if our system is going to need to continue to look at new construction, we have far too many buildings that are far too old. We're going to need to get back into that new construction game at some point. But the other side of that is these projects like Hamilton STEM. So the word we use for them is life cycle renewal. So in our world, ideally a building should last about 50 years. And at 50 years, we need to do something major. And that's that kind of new construction program. And then probably at about that halfway point, so ideally we would have done it at 25 years instead of 60 plus years, we would do a transformation like we're seeing at Hamilton STEM. And so that's the program we're trying to stand up now, is to be able to renovate a couple buildings every summer. And then at some point, hopefully we get back into that new construction and we can kind of retire out some of our other buildings in that method. And so we really, as a system, at our scale, we need to stand up both of those programs together. If we lean on one or the other, we'll never get caught up. So thankfully, we've got the renovation portion, the life cycle renewal kind of stood up right now. And now we'll need to think real long and hard about the new construction part again. And I think everybody kind of knows too, like ultimately that's going to mean consolidation. Like we won't continue to build new small buildings. We'll need to increase in size. And so there's different opportunity and challenges that go with that as well.
And can you share for folks, because I don't know if everyone knows how new construction gets funded, and so that, I know we've just gone through sort of a lot of conversation in the community around consolidation, but I think, for most of us, myself included, it takes several sort of passes for whatever it is that you're listening to, sort of, I got it. So how does that work in terms of how new construction gets funded and why, we need to think about the size of the spaces that we're building?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me start with where we stand right now with funding. So the work that we're doing right now, so the Hamilton project was actually funded with ESSER money. So that was one-time money. And so it was a good chance for us to kind of stand up that concept. And now we'll fund it on an ongoing basis with the permanent improvement levy that was passed in November of 23. So that funding is in place forever, essentially. So that work will continue. And then in Ohio, new construction for school systems is typically paid for with bond issues. It's not the only way to pay for it, but it is the most common way. You see that issue come up on a ballot where a district's trying to raise X number of millions of dollars. They get paid back over time through property taxes. And then one thing that's unique here in the state of Ohio is that we have the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. And for our district, the state will pay 30% of any project that they agree to. So we have to kind of meet their minimum requirements and some of the other stipulations, but then the state pays 30 cents on the dollar towards construction.
Okay, and one of those minimum requirements is the size of the, in terms of the capacity of the space?
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So it is not necessarily uniform across the whole state. So you can imagine there are small rural school districts that only have a few hundred students in their entire population. But for us, the state has told us that our elementaries need to be at least 600 students, middle schools at least 800, and high schools 1,200. So our new construction projects will have to get significantly larger than they mostly stand today.
So I want to, switching gears just a little bit, thinking about new spaces, renovated spaces, and access and safety, right? And I'll start with you, Alex, because I know everyone may not know, but it's important for the spaces that we're going to have ADA compliance. Not all of our schools, because many of them are older. I think you said Hamilton was in 1960.
Yes.
But if the school has 2 floors, is there an elevator, right? Is there ramp access? And so in these spaces, when you're renovating, right, when we're thinking about access for our students with disabilities, or for even community members that may have a disability, when we're thinking about safety, like, how does that impact your thinking about the spaces that we're renovating and building?
Yeah, great question. So it is a project type that we're standing up actually just this year for the first time, now that we have the permanent improvement funding in place. So a couple things I want to touch on there. So accessibility is obviously an enormous concern for us, and a place where we have a lot of work to do. So when we do new construction, we're going to have to follow today's code, and that's going to require that the building is fully accessible for all things.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I want to kind of try to drive home too is I feel like a lot of people think that accessibility means if you're a 2-story building, put in an elevator and you're pretty good. The code is far more detailed than that. It's everything from, can you enter the site? So are our sidewalks and driveways ADA accessible? Are our entrances ADA accessible? Oftentimes you're seeing devices placed way too high. And accessibility is not just about people in wheelchairs, but some of the most detailed requirements are thinking about somebody who's confined to a mobility device like a wheelchair, and where they can and can't reach. Like, can they pull a door open? So there's very specific requirements for what doorways look like. And oftentimes our old buildings don't meet any of those requirements. So part of the reason why we're starting a new project type right now, just to look specifically at accessibility, is that from a practical standpoint, our older buildings like a Hamilton STEM, in spite of these renovations, are not going to be fully ADA compliant. They simply can't. They can't meet every aspect of that code. And so back to that discussion around needing to think about new construction, that is absolutely going to be a requirement for our system to get us to the point at someday when we're fully ADA accessible. But also, just like I told you, everything is an evolution in our world. So the ADA requirements actually just got revised this year. So even our Afrocentric, amongst our newest facility, does not even meet today's requirements.
Wow.
So things like our turning radiuses for bathrooms have increased.
And that's been since 17.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's correct. Now, do I think we're going to go back and make major changes to those buildings? No. And accessibility is looked at, I think, more kind of as a spectrum. I mean, there are some absolute minimum requirements.
You won't get a new building. I've sent you a new building.
Right. I'm still rooting for them, right? Even though I'm not there every day. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then, I mean, obviously in terms of safety and security, there are a lot of things we can back into in our older buildings, and we've made a lot of those upgrades, doing things like secure vestibules in all of the buildings. But obviously when you can start from scratch in new construction, that is the best time to kind of rethink your whole strategy, from how your visitors are arriving to your site, how they're engaging and working throughout your building, and then how they disperse at the end of the day. But there's certainly plenty of things that we can improve in our buildings now that we have permanent improvement funding in place.
And so let's talk about safety a little bit. I think you were leaning into in terms of, ingress, egress, entrance, exiting, right? I know we've been doing some work across the system, just trying to sort of think about that. How does that factor into your thinking about the spaces that we're building?
So I think safety is always going to be on our minds. I don't think we're even allowed to at this point, say that there's not some new threat, some new concern. Some of them you can see, some of them you can't, that we're always going to be thinking about. So we're at the point where I think every building where we could do a secure vestibule has been upgraded. So we've got visitor management integrated, so our visitors can't just come into the building. Right now, we're actually going to start talking about some site lighting. I think we're going to be starting to talk about whether our buildings are appropriately landscaped. Lots of places where people can kind of hide out. So really looking at, so a lot of the safety improvements I think we'll look at here in the near future will probably be a lot less kind of bricks and sticks focused. They're more kind of, there's some of the simplest things, and yet you have to watch them, like plants grow, right? So you plant a low hedge and it's not a problem today, but in 10 years it's a big hedge and now somebody can hide behind it and maybe it's blocking part of a window. So some of the security things are very obvious, some of them not so much. Like maybe the intuitive you would know them, but really kind of taking that lens at facilities.
So, we're sort of coming in for a landing a little bit here. So I want to talk about two things. They connect. One is sort of this idea of, I know that we're always forward looking, right? We're in the 21st century now, and there's an idea in architecture that, Alex, I'm sure you're familiar with. Others may be, that this idea of form follows function, right? And so, I want to hear from our lay people, right? the non-architects amongst us, right?
Great. This will be good.
How and I'll make it clarify. So, what we're talking about is like earlier before we were on camera, Dr. Brady was trying out the new chairs and taking a spin, and in our new spaces, certainly I'm familiar with this most recently from Afrocentric, but I've been in a lot of other spaces, right? Having flexible seating, right, is one. Having, the types of chairs and tables that make it easy to group students, have small groups of students, or chairs with wheels, which, sometimes it makes people nervous, but, it allows them to sort of move to different spaces. And so I'm wondering about, in terms of in the case of Hamilton, STEM has probably been more sort of furniture, right? But how that impacts teaching and learning. And so I'm curious about that from Dr. Brady, from your vantage point, and Nikki, from your vantage point. And then, Alex, as they're sharing, I'd like to hear from you also about, other things. We talked about, at Afrocentric, there's sort of these open space concepts and what that allows you to do from a teaching and learning standpoint. So we'll start. We'll just sort of go around and share thoughts.
Well, one of the things that's nice about the furniture, for example, the teachers can reconfigure the room for small groups, and that's a nice feature. And the flexible seating has really helped some of our students that, like myself, that like to spin around.
Yeah.
And they can still keep learning, and it's keeping them going on a forward path.
Sure.
That's my kickoff for you.
The teachers, we keep talking about the buy-in, and you guys brought us, like, Alex and his team came to us with the buy-in, and the teachers got to pick the furniture from their room, and that was key. And there were many, many options of furniture settings for the room, and each grade level got to pick their own. And there was flexible seating, and so they have, like, a lot of the classrooms have comfortable seating where there are couches and stools and little laptop tables. And students like being able to go to the comfortable couches because when they're falling apart or they're having a moment, they no longer have to leave the classroom to calm down. They can just go to one of the couches or they can go to one of the stools. And they can still remain in the classroom, still have the lesson, but they're in a comfortable space where they can get themselves together and then return back to the classroom setting. So there's a separate space for them to calm down. For students who might be a little antsy, or for adults who might be a little antsy, as you mentioned, Dr. Brady spinning around on his chair. There are rocker chairs. Like some of the small group tables have rocker chairs at them where they just rock back and forth. And so those students who need to move, and I'm an adult who always needs to move, if you haven't noticed, they're rocker chairs where you just sit there and rock back and forth. And that's not so much a distraction because the chair is set up for those students to be able to rock back and forth. Some of our classrooms have stadium seating, which means the desks in front are small, and then there are counter height desks. Those are for the standers or for the...
And you were right with that shared leadership thing. You should let her go
I
first.
know, right? I'm like, jeez.
They're
Go lots of water.
They're for the standers, or and maybe they're not for the standers. I don't know standers, but for those kids who can't sit down, who want to stand up and learn, you put those at the taller desks, and they just get to stand back there and do their work, and they can just move around at their desk in their little space, and they're not disrupting everybody in the front of the room by standing up in front of everybody. You can just have them standing back at the taller desks and everybody else can see, or it also provides an opportunity for them to see over the people sitting if they are sitting down, the seats are higher as well, so they can see over the people sitting in front of the room. So it gives an opportunity for every kind of learner.
So, Alex, before you jump in, when you were talking, I was thinking about a visit that we had. J.P. Morgan Chase is a big supporter of Columbus City Schools, and so there was a team of us that went out to their Polaris campus, and I had never been there. I, sort of knew it was there, but had never been on the site. And, you go there, it's like it's another world, right? There's a Starbucks in there, there's a dry cleaners. But then what was so shocking to me, or most, shocking, not in a negative way, but I was like, there's table tennis going on, right? And I'm thinking like, okay. And I started thinking about what does it mean to prepare our kids for the 21st century? I mean, these are places, this is one of the largest employers. I think there's 17,000 employees on this campus, right? And they recognize that movement's important, right? That, in order to be productive, you don't just need to be seated in straight rows in these very sort of regulated ways that are from the beginning of the 19th century. So, kudos for sort of your noticings, and I think many of the things you shared are right on, as well as Dr. Brady's observation around sort of students working in groups, because people work in teams now. It's no more where you go into the workplace and you're working on your own. You're working with a group, a team of people to come up with solutions. So. I think all of this it means that we're pointed in the right direction, Alex. So, give us some final thoughts on sort of what you're thinking in terms of these impacts and what these spaces can provide from a teaching and learning standpoint.
Oh, goodness. I feel like there's so much opportunity. I certainly appreciate hearing all the feedback, because we haven't had a chance to connect yet this year to kind of hear like how things are getting settled in. But I guess I feel really positive that we've set up a good framework for how we continue this work. And we've talked about this before too. Like, I feel like in a system like ours, it's this balance between standards, central office, and we need things to meet these objectives, and autonomy. Mm-hmm. And I think we've found a pretty happy medium in these projects where we can kind of set some standards and requirements for how we need things to function, and still give our staff some autonomy, which means they can then give it to our students as well to do the work. And so I think that part's incredibly exciting.
Well, I want to personally thank each of you. Certainly Dr. Brady, we've worked together for a long time. I have a great degree of respect for your work. And certainly, Nikki, we've got a chance to connect previously. But thank you for the work that you're doing as a teacher. And particularly now, we're in a national teaching shortage. So this is my stay conversation to you and all our listeners. We need you, don't go. And we appreciate you for what you do for the students. I was a teacher for 9 years, and I found out that teaching is rocket science. Matter of fact, it's more than rocket science, because we make the rocket scientists. And anyone that can be in a classroom with 30 kids and figure out how to differentiate for kids who have different needs, coming from different spaces, is a miracle worker. And so I spent the most time talking to you because it's teacher chat. But certainly, Alex, you're important too. And thank you for creating the enabling conditions for us as a system to continue to progress, not only in our infrastructure, but in our teaching and learning practices. Tyler will be back next time, my other co-host. She's sitting off with bated breath, waiting to jump in. But I said, no, not this time, joking. But certainly appreciative of all of our listeners. And until next time, thank you, and bye-bye.